The Grand Victorian Hotel in San Francisco had seen better days, but Sarah Chin didn't mind the faded elegance when she checked in for her business conference. The marble lobby still gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the brass elevator retained its old-world charm, even if it creaked ominously between floors. Room 412, the elderly desk clerk said, sliding the brass key across the mahogany counter. His pale eyes lingered on her face with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Enjoy your stay, miss." Sarah's room was spacious but cold, despite the California heat outside. Heavy velvet curtains blocked most of the afternoon sun, casting everything in perpetual twilight. She unpacked quickly, eager to explore the city before her meetings began tomorrow. That evening, she returned from dinner to find her bed turned down and a mint on her pillow. Strange, she hadn't requested turn-down service. She called the front desk. "Oh yes," the same clerk answered. "Thomas takes care of our long-term guests personally. He's been with us for quite some time. But I'm only staying 2 nights. Pause. Of course. My mistake." The next morning, Sarah woke to find her clothes neatly pressed and hanging in the closet. Again, she hadn't requested this service. When she called down, the clerk seemed confused. "Thomas? I'm sorry, miss, but we don't have anyone by that name on staff. But yesterday you said." "I think there's been some confusion. Would you like to speak with the manager?" Before Sarah could respond, there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find a tall, gaunt man in an old-fashioned bellhop uniform, navy blue with gold braiding, the kind hotels stopped using decades ago. His face was pale as parchment, and his eyes held that same unreadable expression as the desk clerk. "Good morning, Miss Chin. I trust you slept well?" His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place. "Are you Thomas?" He smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Indeed. I've been taking care of guests in this hotel since 1952. I do hope you're satisfied with my service." Something about his presence made the room feel even colder. "I didn't request any special services." "Oh, but you're in room 412. That's my room to tend to." He stepped closer, and Sarah caught a whiff of something unpleasant, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. "I've been waiting so long for another guest in 412. "Waiting? What happened to the last guest?" Thomas's smile widened. She decided to extend her stay. Permanently. Sarah's blood chilled. She tried to close the door, but Thomas's hand shot out with inhuman speed, holding it open. His grip left frost on the brass handle. "You see, Miss Chin, room 412 was my room when I was alive. I worked double shifts, slept there between services. This hotel was my entire world." His eyes began to glow with a sickly yellow light. "When the fire started in 1952, I tried to save the guests on the 4th floor. The smoke got me before I could escape. The temperature in the room plummeted." Sarah could see her breath now, and ice began forming on the windows. "They rebuilt the hotel, but they kept my room exactly as it was. A memorial, they said. But I never left. I've been serving guests in room 412 ever since, waiting for someone to appreciate my dedication." "I have to go," Sarah whispered, backing toward the window. "But you haven't experienced my full service yet." Thomas glided into the room, his feet not quite touching the floor. "I've prepared something special for you." The bathroom door swung open, revealing a bathtub filled with ice water. Floating in it was a woman in a business suit, her skin blue-white, eyes frozen open in terror. "The previous guest," Thomas explained conversationally. "She tried to leave too soon. I had to convince her to stay." Sarah screamed and ran for the door, but it slammed shut. The lock turned with a metallic click. Now," Thomas said, appearing directly in front of her. "Good service requires patience. You'll find my attention to detail is unparalleled." The room began to spin, walls closing in. Sarah felt her body temperature dropping, her limbs growing heavy. Thomas reached out with fingers like icicles. "Don't worry, Miss Chin. You'll never want for anything again. I'll take care of you forever." The last thing Sarah saw was Thomas's yellowed smile before the cold claimed her completely. The next morning, the desk clerk made a note in the guest registry. Room 412, extended stay, indefinite checkout. He'd made the same notation many times over the years. Thomas was such a dedicated employee even in death. The hotel's most valued guests always received his personal attention. And in room 412, Thomas began preparing for the next arrival, humming an old tune as he arranged fresh flowers, the kind that never died, just like him. The overlook perched on the Maine coast like a Gothic sentinel, its weathered shingles and shuttered windows facing the endless Atlantic. Detective Ray Morrison arrived on a Tuesday in October, checking in for what he hoped would be a quiet vacation, his first in 3 years. "Welcome to the Overlook," said the night manager, a thin man with prematurely gray hair and nervous eyes. His nameplate read David Crane. "You're our only guest this week. Off-season, you understand." Ray nodded, accepting the old-fashioned skeleton key. The lobby was all dark wood and maritime antiques, ship wheels and anchor chains decorating the walls. A grandfather clock in the corner ticked with metronomic precision. "Dinner's served until 9, Crane continued. "Though I should mention, we've had some disturbances lately. Nothing serious, but if you hear anything unusual during the night, please don't investigate on your own. Just call the front desk." "What kind of disturbances?" Crane's nervous laugh echoed in the empty lobby. "Old building, you know. Settles at night. The wind off the ocean can make all sorts of sounds." Ray's room on the 3rd floor overlooked the rocky coastline. Through his window, he could see the lighthouse beams sweeping across the dark water. The room was comfortable enough, 4-poster bed, antique dresser, and a fireplace with logs already stacked. He dined alone in the grand dining room, served by an elderly waitress who barely spoke. The lobster was excellent, but the silence was oppressive. Every sound seemed amplified, his fork against the plate, the wine pouring, his footsteps on the hardwood floor. Around midnight, Ray was awakened by voices. Low, urgent conversations seemed to be coming from somewhere below his room. He pressed his ear to the floor but couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of hushed discussion. Remembering Crane's warning, he almost called the front desk. But his detective instincts kicked in. He'd investigated enough cases to know when something wasn't right. Ray slipped into his clothes and crept into the hallway. The voices were clearer now, definitely coming from the 2nd floor. He found the staircase and descended carefully, avoiding the steps that creaked. The 2nd floor hallway was dimmer than his own, lit only by antique sconces that cast wavering shadows. The voices were coming from room 201. Ray approached the door and listened. "Has to be tonight," someone was saying. "We can't wait any longer." "What if he hears?" another voice replied. This one sounded like Crane. "He's a heavy sleeper. Besides, after what happened to the last one, we know exactly how much to use." Ray's blood ran cold. Were they talking about him? He pressed closer to the door, trying to hear more. "The detective's different though," Crane was saying. "More suspicious. He was asking questions earlier." "All the more reason to handle this quickly," the first voice replied. "Go get the chloroform. I'll prepare the room." Ray's hand instinctively went to his service weapon, then remembered he'd left it locked in his car. This was supposed to be a vacation. He needed to get back to his room and call for backup. As he turned to leave, the old floorboard beneath his feet let out a loud groan. The voices inside room 201 stopped immediately. Ray ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Behind him, he heard the door open and footsteps pounding down the hallway. "There he is," someone shouted. Ray reached the 3rd floor and sprinted toward his room, fumbling for the skeleton key. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get it in the lock. The door finally opened and he rushed inside, immediately grabbing his cell phone. No signal. Of course, the Maine coast was notorious for dead zones. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Ray looked around desperately for a weapon, settling on a heavy brass candlestick from the mantelpiece. The footsteps stopped outside his door. Knock, knock, knock. "Detective Morrison?" It was Crane's voice, artificially calm. "Is everything all right? I thought I heard running." Ray said nothing, gripping the candlestick tighter. "Detective? I know you're in there. We just want to talk." The door handle turned slowly. Ray had forgotten to lock it in his panic. 3 men entered: Crane, the elderly waitress, who was apparently a man in disguise, and a burly guy Ray hadn't seen before. They moved with practiced coordination. "Now, Detective," Crane said soothingly, "there's no need for violence. We're going to take very good care of you." "Who are you people?" Ray demanded, backing toward the window. "We're the permanent staff," Crane replied. "This hotel has a very exclusive clientele. Guests who appreciate privacy." The burly man lunged forward. Ray swung the candlestick, catching him in the temple. The man dropped like a stone, blood pooling on the antique rug. "That was unnecessary," Crane said, producing a chloroform-soaked rag. "We prefer our guests cooperative." Ray realized with horror that these people were killers. The disturbances Crane had mentioned, the lack of other guests, the isolated location. It was all deliberate. How many? Ray asked, stalling for time while he calculated his chances of reaching the window. How many what? How many people have you murdered? Crane smiled coldly. We don't murder, detective. We curate only the finest guests for our permanent collection. The waitress circled around Ray's left side while Crane approached from the right. Ray was trapped. The lighthouse keeper helps us dispose of the evidence, Crane continued conversationally. Very convenient having the ocean so close. Bodies disappear completely in the deep water. Ray made his decision. He hurled the candlestick at the window, shattering the glass, then dove through the opening. He landed hard on the inn's slate roof, rolling down the steep incline. Loose shingles scattered around him as he slid toward the edge. At the last second, he managed to grab the gutter, his legs dangling 3 stories above the rocky coastline. He won't make it, he heard Crane say from the broken window. The fall will kill him. Ray's grip was slipping. The metal gutter was old and beginning to pull away from the building. But he could see the lighthouse in the distance, its beams sweeping across the water. If the keeper was part of this, then the lighthouse was the last place he should go. But maybe, just maybe, there was a boat. He let go. Ray hit the rocky slope and tumbled down toward the shore, his body slamming against boulders and scrub brush. Pain shot through his ribs, his shoulder, his leg. But he was alive. Behind him, lights came on throughout the inn. They would be coming after him soon. Ray limped toward the lighthouse, hoping against hope that he could find some way to signal for help. As he got closer, he could see a small motorboat tied to a wooden dock. The lighthouse door was unlocked. Ray climbed the spiral staircase to the lamp room, his injured leg screaming with each step. The lighthouse keeper was nowhere to be seen, probably back at the inn helping with the search. Ray reached the top and looked out over the dark ocean. In the distance he could see lights, a Coast Guard cutter on patrol. He grabbed the lighthouse controls and began flashing an SOS signal. ... .. The cutter's searchlight immediately swung toward the lighthouse, acknowledging the signal. Ray kept flashing until he saw the boat change course, heading directly for the lighthouse dock. Only then did he allow himself to collapse, exhaustion and pain finally overwhelming him. The Coast Guard found Ray unconscious in the lamp room, his body broken but alive. When they searched the Overlook Inn, they discovered a basement room filled with personal effects, wallets, jewelry, suitcases, belonging to dozens of missing persons from across New England. Crane and his accomplices had been running their exclusive hotel for over a decade, targeting isolated travelers who wouldn't be missed immediately. The inn's guest register told the true story, hundreds of check-ins but very few check-outs. Ray spent 2 months in the hospital recovering from his injuries. When he was finally discharged, he drove back to the Maine coast one last time. The Overlook Inn stood empty now, its windows boarded up, its secrets finally exposed. But sometimes, on foggy nights when the lighthouse beams swept across the abandoned building, locals claimed they could still see lights moving behind those boarded windows. And sometimes they said you could hear the faint sound of someone ringing the front desk bell over and over, waiting for service that would never come. The Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles had hosted countless celebrities and their secrets over the decades, but nothing in its storied history compared to what happened during Jessica Walsh's stay in February 2024. Jessica, a food critic for Gourmet and Travel, had booked the penthouse suite for a week while reviewing LA's most exclusive restaurants. The Marmont was perfect, discreet, luxurious, and with a kitchen staff renowned for their late-night room service. Ms. Walsh, the concierge said as she checked in, "We've prepared the Marilyn Monroe suite for you. I trust you'll find everything to your satisfaction. Should you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call room service. We pride ourselves on fulfilling any request, no matter the hour." The suite was magnificent, sprawling living room, marble bathroom, and a bedroom that had indeed once hosted the famous actress. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of West Hollywood, twinkling like scattered diamonds in the twilight. Jessica settled in with her laptop, planning to work on reviews while ordering from the hotel's famous kitchen. She'd heard stories about their room service, how they could procure anything a guest desired, from rare delicacies to midnight cravings that seemed impossible to fulfill. Around 11 p.m. she called down for a simple dinner: lobster thermidor, a bottle of Sancerre, and their signature chocolate soufflé. Of course, Ms. Walsh, the voice on the phone was smooth, cultured. "Chef Bernard will prepare that personally. Expect delivery in 30 minutes. The food arrived precisely on time, wheeled in by a server in crisp whites who introduced himself as Henri. He was pale, thin, with dark eyes that seemed to assess Jessica with uncomfortable intensity. "Chef Bernard's compliments," Henri said, lifting silver cloches with theatrical flourish. "He hopes you'll find this satisfying." The lobster was perfect, succulent, rich, prepared with a technique Jessica had never encountered. The wine paired beautifully, and the chocolate soufflé was transcendent. But there was something else, an underlying flavor she couldn't identify. Something that made her feel slightly dizzy, euphoric even. "Please convey my compliments to Chef Bernard," she told Henri as he cleared the dishes. "He will be pleased. He so rarely gets to prepare for someone with your refined palate." Henry's smile revealed teeth that seemed too sharp in the lamplight. "He mentioned that he has something special planned for tomorrow evening. A tasting menu if you're interested." Jessica agreed immediately. Whatever that mystery ingredient had been, she wanted to experience it again. The next day passed in a haze. Jessica found herself unable to concentrate on her work, instead spending hours staring out the window, waiting for evening. She felt hollow, hungry in a way she'd never experienced before. When Henri arrived with the tasting menu, Jessica was practically salivating. 7 courses, each more exquisite than the last. Rare mushrooms that seemed to glow with their own light. A soup that tasted like liquid starlight. Meat so tender it dissolved on her tongue, though she couldn't identify what animal it came from. "What is this?" she asked, indicating the meat course. Henry's smile was enigmatic. "Chef Bernard's specialty. Very rare. Very exclusive." With each bite, Jessica felt herself changing. Her senses became hyperacute. She could hear conversations in rooms 3 floors below, smell the fierce sweat of a nervous actor in the lobby, feel the pulse of every heartbeat in the hotel. "The transformation is beginning," Henri observed, watching her with clinical interest. "Chef Bernard will be so pleased. It's been months since we've had a successful conversion." "Conversion?" Jessica's voice sounded strange to her own ears, deeper somehow. "You're becoming one of us now," Henri explained, beginning to change as well. His pale skin grew translucent, revealing dark veins beneath. His eyes turned completely black. "The special ingredient in your meals, it's been altering your cellular structure. Soon you'll understand what true hunger means." Jessica tried to stand but found her legs wouldn't support her. She looked down and gasped. Her skin was taking on the same translucent quality as Henry's. "What have you done to me?" "Given you a gift," Henri replied. "Chef Bernard has been perfecting his technique for decades. He was once human too, you know. A brilliant chef who discovered the secret ingredient in a remote village in Romania. It grants eternal life, heightened senses, perfect health. But it comes with a price." Jessica's reflection in the window showed her what that price was. Her canine teeth had elongated into points, her eyes were darkening, and she could see her own veins pulsing with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. "We feed on essence," Henri continued. "Life force, if you will. That's why our guests always rave about the meals. We literally serve them parts of ourselves, our energy. But eventually we need to replenish." "You're vampires," Jessica whispered. "Such a crude term. We prefer culinary artists. We've elevated feeding to high art. And you, my dear, are going to help us continue our work." The transformation was accelerating. Jessica could feel her human life slipping away, replaced by something ancient and hungry. But with the change came clarity. She could sense every living being in the hotel, their warmth, their vitality calling to her. "There's a billionaire's son in the penthouse above you," Henri said, reading her newfound hunger. "Young, healthy, full of life. He's ordered room service for midnight. Would you like to help me deliver it?" Jessica wanted to resist, to cling to her humanity. But the hunger was overwhelming, a craving that made her previous addiction to gourmet food seem laughable. She needed to feed, needed to taste that precious life essence. "Yes," she heard herself say. An hour later they wheeled a cart up to the penthouse. The billionaire's son, Marcus, answered the door in silk pajamas, clearly expecting a romantic dinner with the starlet he'd been courting. "I didn't order anything yet," he said, confused. "Compliments of the management," Henri replied smoothly. "A welcome gift for our most valued guests." Marcus let them in, and Jessica watched with her enhanced senses as Henri uncovered the dishes. The smell of the food was intoxicating, but underneath it was something even more appealing. The scent of Marcus's blood, his life force radiating warmth and vitality. "This looks incredible," Marcus said, sitting down at the small dining table. "What's the occasion?" "A celebration," Jessica said, her voice now carrying the same hypnotic quality as Henry's. "Of new beginnings." Marcus took a bite of the first course and immediately relaxed, the same euphoric expression crossing his face that Jessica remembered from her own first meal. The special ingredient was working. As Marcus ate, Jessica and Henri began their own feast. They didn't need to bite him. The vampiric conversion had given them more refined methods. They simply placed their hands on his shoulders and began to draw his life force directly through their palms. Marcus continued eating, unaware that his life was being drained away with each bite. The food contained just enough of their essence to keep him compliant while they fed. When it was over, Marcus slumped forward onto the table, aged decades in minutes. His hair had turned white, his skin wrinkled and spotted. He was still alive, but barely a husk of his former self. "He'll recover," Henri assured Jessica, who was staring at what they'd done with a mixture of horror and satisfaction. "In a few months he'll look normal again. But he'll never be quite the same. The experience leaves marks." Jessica felt incredible, more alive than she'd ever been, every sense buzzing with supernatural intensity. The hunger was satisfied, at least for now. "How often do we need to feed?" she asked. "Once a week, perhaps twice if we're feeling particularly peckish. The hotel provides a steady stream of guests and we're very discreet. Most victims never even realize what happened. They just remember having the most amazing meal of their lives." Over the following weeks, Jessica learned the full extent of their operation. Chef Bernard ran a network of supernatural entities throughout LA's most exclusive hotels and restaurants. They were the secret behind the city's legendary culinary scene of vampiric chefs who literally put their souls into their cooking. The Chateau Marmont was just one of many feeding grounds. The Beverly Hills Hotel, the Peninsula, the Sunset Tower, all harbored their own versions of Henri and Bernard, offering guests experiences they'd never forget, for prices they'd never fully understand. Jessica's food critic career became the perfect cover. She could travel to any city, stay at any luxury hotel, and always find her own kind working in the shadows of the kitchen. Her reviews became coded messages, directing other supernatural beings to the best feeding spots while warning away those who might expose their secrets. But sometimes, late at night in whatever penthouse suite she was occupying, Jessica would remember what it felt like to be human. To taste regular food, to feel simple pleasures, to exist without the constant gnawing hunger that drove her kind. In those moments, she would stare at her reflection, still beautiful, still young, forever frozen at the moment of her conversion, and wonder if the price of immortality was worth paying. Then morning would come, and with it the hunt for new prey. Because no matter how much she fed, no matter how many lives she drained, the hunger never truly went away. It just waited, patient and eternal, for the next room service call. The Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago was a monument to 1920s excess, 40 floors of Art Deco grandeur rising into the Midwest sky. Software developer Mike Patterson chose it for his extended stay, not just for its historical charm, but for its reputation as one of the city's most reliably Wi-Fi connected hotels. What he didn't know was that the Meridian had other connections, ones that transcended the physical world entirely. 40th floor, sir, the bellhop said, using an actual brass key to open Mike's room. You'll find the view spectacular. On clear days, you can see all the way to Michigan. Mike's corner suite was indeed impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The room retained its original 1920s character, mahogany furniture, brass fixtures, and an ornate ceiling that must have cost a fortune to restore. He settled in to work on his latest project, a complex database system that required his full attention. The Meridian's old-world quiet was perfect for concentration, broken only by the distant sound of the elevator arriving and departing on his floor. It was that elevator that first made him curious. Mike had chosen the 40th floor specifically because it was the top floor of guest rooms. The 41st housed only mechanical equipment. But throughout his first day, he kept hearing the elevator stop at his level, the doors opening and closing, footsteps in the hallway. Yet whenever he looked out his peephole, the corridor was empty. By evening, his programmer's mind was seeking patterns. He began timing the elevator sounds. Every hour on the hour, the mechanical hum would rise past his floor, stop briefly, then continue upward. But that made no sense. There was nowhere above the 40th floor for guests to go. Around midnight, Mike decided to investigate. He opened his door just as the elevator arrived, its brass doors sliding open with the well-oiled whisper of quality machinery. The elevator car was empty, but the call buttons showed it had indeed stopped on 41. Mike pressed the up button. When the elevator returned, he stepped inside and examined the control panel. Buttons for floors 1 through 40, plus a basement level. No 41st floor button. Yet he'd clearly heard it stop there. Curious, he pressed and held the button for floor 40 while simultaneously pressing the basement button. A trick he'd learned in his college dorm for accessing restricted floors. The elevator lurched slightly, then began rising past the 40th floor. When the doors opened, Mike found himself facing a hallway identical to his own, but somehow different. The lighting was dimmer, more golden, and the carpet pattern seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking directly at it. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors bearing room numbers in the 4100s. Soft music drifted from somewhere, not modern music but the kind of jazz that had been popular when the hotel was new. Mike stepped out and the elevator doors immediately closed behind him. When he pressed the call button, nothing happened. The elevator was gone. Checking in? A voice asked behind him. Mike spun around to find a man in a 1920s bellhop uniform. Not a reproduction, but the genuine article, complete with brass buttons and a pillbox hat. The man's face had a waxy quality, like an old photograph. I was just exploring, Mike said. A curious guest. We get those from time to time. The bellhop's smile was pleasant but somehow wrong. Welcome to the Meridian's exclusive floor. We cater to a very special clientele here. What kind of clientele? Guests who have extended their stays considerably. The bellhop gestured down the hallway. Would you like to meet some of them? Despite every instinct telling him to refuse, Mike found himself nodding. There was something compelling about the bellhop's voice, a hypnotic quality that made resistance seem impossible. They walked to room 4101. The bellhop knocked gently. Come in, called a woman's voice from inside. The room was a perfect replica of a 1920s hotel suite, but the woman sitting at the vanity was clearly from a much earlier era. Her dress was Victorian, her hair styled in elaborate ringlets. When she turned to face them, Mike saw that she was translucent. He could see the wallpaper through her body. A new guest, she said with delight. How wonderful. I'm Margaret Thornfield. I've been staying here since 1887. 1887? Mike's voice came out as a whisper. But this hotel was built in 1923. Margaret laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Oh, my dear boy, buildings are just the physical manifestation. The Meridian exists on many levels and many times. I was here when it was just an empty lot, waiting for the right moment to manifest. The bellhop nodded approvingly. The Meridian exists in what you might call a temporal fold. Past, present, and future overlap here. Our guests check in from across the decades. They continued down the hallway, visiting more rooms. A Union soldier from 1863, still wearing his blood-stained uniform. A flapper from 1925 who had overdosed on gin and laudanum. A businessman from 1987 who had jumped from his office window during the stock market crash. All of them were dead. All of them had somehow found their way to the Meridian's impossible 41st floor. But I'm not dead, Mike protested as they reached the end of the hallway. Not yet, the bellhop agreed. But you will be. Everyone who finds the 41st floor is destined to join our permanent collection eventually. That's impossible. I'm going back to my room. I'm afraid that's not an option. The bellhop's pleasant expression never wavered. The elevator only works one way for living guests. Up. Mike pressed the call button frantically, but the elevator didn't respond. He tried the stairwell door, locked. Every window in every room looked out onto the same view. Chicago in the 1920s, complete with Model T cars and gas streetlights. You see, the bellhop explained, the Meridian is a kind of collection point for lost souls. People who die suddenly, violently, or with unfinished business are drawn here. The building exists partially outside of normal time and space, which is why it can accommodate guests from different eras. But I'm alive. Yes, and that makes you quite special. Living guests are rare. The last one we had was in 1994, a young woman who got curious about the sound she heard above her room, just like you. They showed Mike to room 4142, identical to his own suite but somehow more oppressive. The windows here looked out onto a swirling gray void. This will be your room when you're ready to join us permanently, the bellhop said. Until then, you're free to explore the floor, get to know your future neighbors. Time moves differently here. A day on this floor might be a minute in your world or a year. It's quite flexible. Mike spent what felt like weeks trying to find a way back to the living world. He explored every room, talked to dozens of dead guests, searched for hidden passages or forgotten stairwells. Nothing worked. The dead were friendly enough, but their advice was always the same. Accept your fate, make peace with your death, and join the eternal community of the Meridian's 41st floor. Some guests had been there for over a century. Others, like the businessman from 1987, were relatively recent arrivals. All of them had eventually stopped fighting their situation and settled into the timeless routine of the hotel. "The trick," explained Margaret Thornfield during one of their many conversations, "is to let go of your attachment to the living world. Once you do that, existence here becomes quite pleasant. No pain, no aging, no worldly concerns. Just eternal rest and luxury." But Mike wasn't ready to give up. He was a programmer. Solving impossible problems was what he did for a living. There had to be a logical solution. The breakthrough came when he realized that the elevator's control system might be more sophisticated than it appeared. If the building existed in a temporal fold, then the elevator was essentially a time machine. And time machines, in theory, could be programmed. Mike spent days studying the elevator's brass control panel, looking for hidden circuits or additional controls. Finally, he noticed that the floor buttons weren't just buttons. They were tiny brass screens, displaying numbers that occasionally flickered. Using techniques he'd learned in reverse engineering software, Mike began pressing combinations of buttons in specific sequences, trying to access the elevator's programming interface. On his 50th attempt, the control panel suddenly displayed a series of glowing symbols that looked like a mixture of circuitry diagrams and mystical sigils. Mike realized he was looking at the elevator's operating system, a blend of 1920s engineering and something far older and more mysterious. Working with supernatural code was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The logic was based on emotions and intentions rather than binary operations. But gradually, Mike began to understand the system. The elevator was programmed to bring living guests to the 41st floor when they demonstrated curiosity about death or the supernatural. It was a kind of cosmic mousetrap, baited with mystery and activated by human nature. But like any program, it had vulnerabilities. Mike spent another week crafting what he thought of as a temporal exploit, a sequence of commands that would convince the elevator he belonged in the living world, not the world of the dead. When he finally implemented his hack, the elevator doors opened immediately. But instead of the familiar brass interior, Mike found himself looking at a car made entirely of light, with controls that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He stepped inside, and suddenly he was falling through layers of reality, decades, centuries, millennia flashing past like shuffled cards. He saw the lot where the Meridian would be built, saw it as a trading post, as prairie, as ocean floor. Then, with a sensation like surfacing from deep water, Mike found himself back in the normal elevator, traveling down from the 40th floor to the lobby. He stumbled out, gasping, into the familiar marble and brass grandeur of the Meridian's ground floor. The desk clerk looked up with concern. "Sir, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mike almost laughed at the irony. "I need to check out. Now." "But sir, you've only been here one day. Is there a problem with your room?" One day. Mike had spent subjective months on the 41st floor, but only one day had passed in the real world. As he packed his belongings, Mike noticed that room service had left a bottle of champagne in his room, a welcome gift from the management. The card was signed by the same bellhop he'd met on the 41st floor, but the signature was dated 1923. Mike left the champagne unopened and got out of the Meridian as quickly as possible. He didn't take the elevator. Instead, he walked down 40 flights of stairs, his footsteps echoing through the empty stairwell like a countdown to freedom. Outside on the street, Chicago looked exactly as it should in the present day. Modern cars, LED streetlights, people in contemporary clothing walking past with smartphones pressed to their ears. But Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched from the 40th floor, or perhaps the 41st. He never stayed in a historic hotel again. And whenever he had to work late in a tall building, he always took the stairs. But sometimes, in quiet moments, Mike found himself wondering about Margaret Thornfield and the others. Were they still there, waiting patiently in their temporal prison? Did they remember the living programmer who had briefly shared their impossible existence? And most disturbing of all, had his escape been real, or just another layer of the Meridian's elaborate trap? The answer came 3 months later, when Mike received a package with no return address. Inside was a brass key with a tag reading Room 4142, and a hotel brochure for the Meridian Tower. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Your room is always ready. Management." Mike threw the key away, but he kept the brochure. Not as a memento, but as a reminder. Some mysteries he had learned were never truly solved, only temporarily escaped. And late at night, when he heard the sound of elevators in his apartment building, Mike Patterson would hold his breath and count the floors, making sure they stopped exactly where they should. because he knew that somewhere in Chicago, in a building that existed between yesterday and tomorrow, an elevator was still running, and it was still looking for curious guests. The Grand Majestic Hotel stood like a forgotten monument against the stormy night sky, its Victorian architecture casting eerie shadows in the flickering streetlights. Sarah pulled her coat tighter as she approached the imposing entrance, the brass doors reflecting her tired face back at her. "Welcome to the Grand Majestic," the desk clerk said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His pale skin seemed almost translucent under the dim lobby lighting. "Checking in?" "Yes, Sarah Mitchell. I have a reservation." The clerk's fingers moved across the keyboard with unnatural speed. "Ah yes, room 237. Top floor, corner room. Excellent view of the cemetery." Sarah's stomach churned. "Cemetery? I didn't know there was a cemetery nearby." "Oh yes." The clerk's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Been there longer than the hotel." "Much longer." The elevator creaked and groaned as it carried Sarah to the 7th floor. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with faded wallpaper depicting wilted roses. Room 237 sat at the very end, its brass number plate tarnished black with age. The key turned with surprising ease and Sarah stepped inside. The room was elegant but cold, furnished with antique pieces that seemed to watch her every move. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, and a musty smell permeated the air despite the ornate ventilation grates. As Sarah unpacked, she noticed something odd about the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection seemed delayed, moving a split second after she did. She waved her hand experimentally and her reflection waved back, but held the pose a moment too long. That first night, Sarah was awakened by the sound of children laughing in the hallway. She checked her phone, 3:33 a.m. The laughter grew louder, accompanied by the sound of small feet running back and forth outside her door. When she peered through the peephole, the hallway was empty and silent. The second night brought new terrors. Sarah awoke to find her belongings rearranged. Her clothes, which she'd left on the chair, were now neatly folded on the bed. Her toiletries had been arranged in a perfect line on the bathroom counter. Most disturbing of all, someone had written "Welcome home" in the steam on the bathroom mirror. On the third night, Sarah decided to investigate. She crept out of her room at midnight and made her way down the empty corridor. The hotel felt different at night, older, more malevolent. The wallpaper seemed to shift and writhe in her peripheral vision, and the floorboards creaked ominously under her feet. She found herself drawn to the hotel's old elevator shaft, one that had been sealed off years ago according to a brass plaque. But tonight, the doors stood open, revealing a void of absolute darkness. From within came the faint sound of music. A child's lullaby played on an old music box. "You shouldn't be here," a voice whispered behind her. Sarah spun around to find a little girl in a Victorian dress standing in the hallway. The child's face was pale as moonlight, her dark hair hanging in limp strands around her shoulders. Most horrifying of all were her eyes, black voids that seemed to absorb the light around them. "This is our floor," the girl continued, her voice echoing strangely in the narrow hallway. "We don't like visitors." More children began to appear, materializing from the shadows like wisps of smoke. All were dressed in clothing from different eras, all bore the same pale, lifeless complexion, and all stared at Sarah with those terrible black eyes. "The hotel collects us," the first girl explained, tilting her head at an unnatural angle. "Children who stayed here and never left. Now we play in the halls forever, and ever, and ever." Sarah backed toward her room, but the door wouldn't open. The key turned, but the lock wouldn't catch. The children began to move closer, their laughter now a discordant symphony that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Don't you want to play with us?" they chanted in unison. "Don't you want to stay?" Sarah ran. She sprinted down the hallway, past the grinning portraits that seemed to track her movement, past the potted plants that reached out with thorny branches. The children's laughter followed her, growing louder and more hysterical with each step. She burst through the stairwell door and took the steps 3 at a time. Behind her, she could hear the sound of small feet on the stairs, dozens of them racing after her like a pack of wild animals. The lobby was dark when Sarah reached it, lit only by a few emergency lights. The desk clerk was nowhere to be seen, but his logbook lay open on the counter. Sarah glanced at it as she ran past and felt her blood turn to ice. Entry after entry bore the same note. Room 237 checked in, never checked out. The dates went back decades. Some entries were in her own handwriting. Sarah burst through the front doors and into the storm, running blindly into the night. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, she turned back to see the hotel. Every window on the 7th floor was lit, and in each one stood the silhouette of a child, watching her. Her phone buzzed with a text message: "Thank you for staying at the Grand Majestic Hotel. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Your room will be waiting for you." Sarah looked at the sender, herself. As she stared at the message, she realized with growing horror that she couldn't remember leaving the hotel. Couldn't remember running down the stairs or bursting through the doors. She looked around and found herself standing in the hotel lobby, the brass key to room 237 cold in her palm. The desk clerk materialized behind the counter, his sharp-toothed smile wider than ever. "Welcome back," he said. "Room 237 is ready for you." And somewhere in the distance, Sarah could hear the sound of children laughing, waiting for their new playmate to join them, forever. The Ashford Manor Hotel sat like a Victorian tumor on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, its Gothic spires piercing the October sky like accusing fingers. Travel writer Amanda Ross had specifically chosen this location for her Halloween article, America's Most Haunted Hotels, but she had no idea she was about to become part of the story herself. "Welcome to the Ashford Manor," the desk clerk said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries despite his apparent youth. His name tag read, Ezekiel, an unusual choice for someone who couldn't be older than 25. "I trust you've come for our unique atmosphere?" The lobby was a masterpiece of Gothic revival architecture, soaring ceilings, stained glass windows depicting scenes of medieval torment, and a grandfather clock that seemed to tick just slightly off rhythm. Most striking was the enormous guest registry book that dominated the front desk, its leather binding cracked with age and sealed with what looked like dried wax. "I'm researching historical hotels," Amanda explained, pulling out her digital recorder. "I'd love to hear about the building's history." Ezekiel's pale eyes gleamed with something that might have been hunger. "Oh, we have quite a history. The Ashford Manor was built in 1692 on the site of the original Salem witch trials. The foundation stones are said to be mortared with the ashes of the accused." He opened the massive registry book, its pages yellowed and brittle. "Every guest who has ever stayed here has signed this book. Every single one without exception." Amanda leaned forward to examine the entries. The handwriting styles ranged from colonial-era script to modern cursive, but something was wrong with the dates. Entries from 1894 were followed by ones from 1743, then 2015, then 1666. "The dates seem mixed up," she observed. "Time moves differently here," Ezekiel explained, his finger tracing along the entries. "The manor exists at the convergence of several temporal ley lines. Past, present, and future intersect within these walls." He turned to a page near the middle of the book. "Look at this entry from 1978. Sarah Mitchell, room 237. She was researching the witch trials just like you." Amanda read the faded ink. Asterisk Sarah Mitchell, October 31st, 1978. Room 237. Purpose, historical research. Time of departure, never, asterisk. Never? Amanda looked up sharply. "She decided to extend her stay indefinitely," Ezekiel said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Many of our guests do. The manor has a way of convincing people to remain." Amanda's room was on the 3rd floor, accessible only by a narrow wooden staircase that creaked ominously under her weight. Room 314 was spacious but oppressive, with heavy curtains that seemed to absorb light rather than filter it. The 4-poster bed dominated the space, its canopy draped with fabric that moved despite the absence of any breeze. As she unpacked, Amanda noticed that the room's mirror was actually a window. She could see into the hallway outside. But the hallway in the reflection showed gas lamps instead of electric lights, and people in period costumes walking back and forth. "Temporal displacement," she murmured, making notes. This was exactly the kind of unique phenomenon her readers would love. That evening, Amanda decided to explore the hotel's common areas. The library was particularly impressive, filled with books that seemed to arrange themselves differently each time she looked away. She was examining a first-edition copy of Cotton Mather's writings on witchcraft when she heard voices coming from behind one of the bookcases. Following the sound, she discovered a hidden passage that led to a circular room she hadn't seen on any of the hotel's floor plans. Inside, a group of people in various period costumes sat around a table, apparently in the middle of some kind of meeting. "Ah, our new guest," said a woman in Puritan dress who could only be from the 1600s. "Please join us. We've been expecting you." Amanda stepped into the room, her journalistic curiosity overriding her caution. "Who are you people?" "Fellow guests of the Ashford Manor," replied a man in a Union Army uniform. I'm Colonel Hartwell, checked in during the autumn of 1863. This is Goodwife Blackwood, 1693. The gentleman in the morning coat is Professor Aldrich, 1889. More introductions followed, guests from across the centuries, all claiming to have been staying at the hotel for decades or longer. They looked solid enough, but Amanda noticed that none of them cast shadows in the flickering candlelight. We meet every evening to discuss the manor's peculiarities, explained Goodwife Blackwood. You see, once you sign the registry, you become part of the hotel's permanent collection. That's impossible, Amanda said, though her voice lacked conviction. Professor Aldrich adjusted his spectacles. My dear lady, I thought the same thing when I arrived to study the building's architecture. That was 134 years ago. I've been trying to leave ever since. The registry is a binding contract, Colonel Hartwell added grimly, written in blood and sealed with dark magic. Every signature is a soul claimed by the manor. Amanda backed toward the door. This is insane. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Goodwife Blackwood said sadly. Once you've signed, the only way to leave is to find someone to take your place. But that requires convincing them to sign the registry willingly. I never signed anything. The room fell silent. Professor Aldrich looked confused. But you must have. Everyone signs upon arrival. It's required for check-in. Amanda's blood ran cold as she remembered the check-in process. Ezekiel had indeed asked her to sign something. She'd assumed it was a standard registration form and signed without reading it carefully. She ran back to her room and grabbed her copy of the registration papers from her purse. The document she'd signed wasn't a hotel registration at all. It was a contract written in archaic legal language, pledging her soul to the Ashford Manor, for all eternity, until such time as another soul willingly takes her place. The signature at the bottom wasn't in her usual handwriting. It was written in what looked like dried blood, and the letters seemed to move and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them. Amanda tried to leave immediately, but the hotel's front door wouldn't open. The windows were sealed shut. Even her cell phone had no signal. The screen showed only static whenever she tried to make a call. Over the following days, Amanda discovered the true horror of her situation. The hotel existed in a temporal loop, with each day resetting at midnight. She would wake up in room 314, try desperately to escape, fail, and then find herself back in bed the next morning with only fragmentary memories of her previous attempts. The other guests tried to help, sharing strategies they'd developed over their decades of imprisonment. Some had tried to destroy the registry book, but it always reappeared intact. Others had attempted to burn down the hotel, only to wake up the next morning in undamaged rooms. The only escape, Professor Aldrich explained during one of their evening meetings, is to convince a living person to willingly sign the registry in your place. But they must do so of their own free will, without coercion or trickery. That's why Ezekiel is so important, added Colonel Hartwell. He's the only one among us who has managed to partially escape. He gets to interact with new arrivals, but he's still bound to the hotel. Amanda learned that Ezekiel had been the previous newest guest, arriving in 1847. Through careful manipulation and genuine charm, he had convinced the traveling salesman to sign the registry in 1856. But because he had used mild deception in the process, his escape was only partial. He became the hotel's eternal desk clerk, forever young, forever trapped, but at least free to move between the lobby and the guest areas. The registry requires absolute honesty, Goodwife Blackwood warned. If there's even a hint of deception or coercion, the contract is void and you remain trapped. Amanda spent weeks studying the other guests' failed escape attempts. The pattern was always the same. Someone would arrive, sign the registry unknowingly, and then one of the trapped souls would try to trick them into taking their place. But the hotel's dark magic could sense any insincerity, any attempt at manipulation. The breakthrough came when Amanda realized that the solution wasn't to trick someone else. It was to break the cycle entirely. She began spending her reset days not trying to escape, but studying the hotel's history. In the library's hidden passages, she found documents dating back to the original construction. The Ashford Manor had been built by Jeremiah Ashford, a Puritan minister who had participated in the witch trials. But according to the records, Ashford himself had been practicing dark magic, using the trials as cover for his own occult activities. The hotel's foundation stones weren't just mortared with ashes. They contained the actual bones of the accused witches, ground up and mixed with their burned remains. The registry book wasn't just a magical contract. It was a phylactery, storing the trapped souls to power Ashford's immortality. But Ashford had made a crucial mistake. In his hubris, he had included his own name in the registry, binding himself to the hotel just like his victims. He was still there, somewhere in the building, sustained by the trapped souls but unable to leave. Amanda finally found him in the hotel's basement, in a room that existed below even the building's deepest foundations. Jeremiah Ashford was ancient beyond measure, his body kept alive by dark magic but withered to little more than skin and bones. He sat in an ornate chair surrounded by candles that burned with unnatural flames, his eyes vacant with centuries of madness. "Another soul comes to bargain," he wheezed when Amanda entered. "But there is no bargain to be made. The compact is sealed, the registry complete." "I'm not here to bargain," Amanda said, pulling out a piece of paper she'd found in the library, Ashford's original contract with the dark forces he had summoned. "I'm here to show you this." Ashford's eyes focused with sudden clarity as he recognized the document. It was his pact with demonic entities, signed in 1692, granting him immortality in exchange for providing them with souls. But Amanda had noticed something that Ashford, in his desperate grab for power, had overlooked. "The contract specifies that you must provide willing souls," Amanda read aloud. "But every person in your registry was tricked into signing. None of them consented willingly to eternal imprisonment." Ashford's face contorted with rage and fear. "No, the signatures are binding. They signed of their own hand. Under false pretenses," Amanda continued, "which, according to the terms of your own demonic contract, makes the entire arrangement void." She pulled out a magnifying glass and showed Ashford the fine print of his original pact. "Look at Clause 7, subsection 3. Should any soul be obtained through deception, trickery, or false representation, the entire compact shall be rendered null and void, and all collected souls shall be released." For the first time in over 3 centuries, genuine terror crossed Jeremiah Ashford's ancient features. "You cannot. The registry is protected. The dark ones will not allow." As if summoned by his words, the temperature in the room plunged to freezing. Shadows began moving independently of their sources, and a sound like grinding stone filled the air. The demonic entities Ashford had bargained with were manifesting, drawn by the threat to their carefully constructed soul trap. But Amanda had prepared for this. She pulled out the hotel's original blueprints and began reading from them in Latin. Not because she spoke the language, but because she had memorized the building's consecration ritual, buried in the construction documents. "Sanctificetur hoc locus." She began, her voice gaining strength with each word. The shadows recoiled as if burned. Ashford screamed, his body beginning to crumble as the magic sustaining him wavered. "The building was consecrated ground before you corrupted it," Amanda shouted over the growing supernatural chaos. "Holy ground cannot be permanently defiled." The registry book, still sitting on the desk in the lobby far above, burst into flames. Amanda could hear the voices of the trapped souls crying out in joy and relief as their supernatural bonds were broken. Ashford made one last desperate attempt to stop her, lunging forward with strength born of centuries of accumulated dark power. But his body, no longer sustained by stolen souls, collapsed into dust before he could reach her. The demonic entities, cheated of their prize, let out shrieks of rage that shattered every window in the hotel. Then they were gone, banished back to whatever hell they had crawled from. Amanda found herself standing in the lobby as the sun rose, surrounded by the translucent forms of dozens of freed souls. They were fading like morning mist, finally able to move on to whatever came after death. "Thank you," Goodwife Blackwood whispered as she dissolved into points of light. "You have given us our freedom." Professor Aldrich tipped his hat. "Brilliant work, my dear. Absolutely brilliant." Colonel Hartwell saluted as he disappeared. "It has been an honor, miss." Even Ezekiel, no longer bound to his desk clerk duties, was able to fade away with a grateful smile. Amanda walked out of the Ashford Manor as the sun fully cleared the horizon. Behind her, the building began to collapse in on itself, its supernatural supports finally failing. Within minutes, nothing remained but a pile of rubble and ash. She drove back to Boston in a daze, wondering if anyone would believe her story. But when she tried to write about her experience, the words wouldn't come. Every time she sat down at her computer, her hands would freeze over the keyboard. It wasn't until weeks later that Amanda understood why. She found a letter in her mailbox with no return address, written in elegant script. "Dear Miss Ross, the forces you encountered at the Ashford Manor are not gone, merely relocated. There are other hotels, other registries, other souls in need of salvation. Your work is not finished. Some truths are too dangerous to share with the general public. but there are those who fight this darkness in secret. If you wish to join us, place a candle in your window tonight. Asterisk. The Guild of the Seekers. Amanda sat in her apartment that evening, holding an unlit candle and staring out at the city lights. She thought about all the historic hotels scattered across the country, all the guest registries that might be more than they appeared. She lit the candle and placed it in her window. The next morning, she received a package containing a list of hotels and a new assignment. Investigate reports of supernatural activity at the Overlook Inn in Maine. The note attached was brief. A detective escaped from there recently. Find out how. Amanda packed her bags and headed north. She had found her true calling, not as a travel writer, but as a hunter of the supernatural, a liberator of trapped souls. And somewhere in the ruins of the Ashford Manor, buried beneath tons of rubble and ash, the wind occasionally carried the sound of voices, not in anguish now, but in gratitude. The dead could finally rest, and the living were safe from one more supernatural predator. But Amanda knew there were others out there, waiting in grand lobbies and elegant suites, their registries open and their pens filled with more than ink. Her work had only just begun. The Grand Palazzo Hotel in Las Vegas was exactly the kind of establishment that catered to people with more money than sense. 70 floors of marble, gold, and crystal rising from the desert like a modern Tower of Babel. For Rebecca Hartwell, recently divorced and inheriting her ex-husband's casino winnings, it seemed like the perfect place to start her new life. Mrs. Hartwell, the concierge said with practiced elegance, welcome to the Grand Palazzo. I'm Vincent Cardamone, your personal concierge. I understand you'll be staying in the presidential suite for an extended period. Vincent was impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, his silver hair slicked back, his manicured hands gesturing gracefully as he spoke. Everything about him screamed expensive taste and refined culture. Exactly the kind of sophisticated companion Rebecca felt she needed. I'm not sure how long I'll be staying, Rebecca admitted. I'm starting over. Of course, Vincent's smile was warm, understanding. The Grand Palazzo specializes in new beginnings. I personally oversee our VIP services, and I assure you we can provide anything you might desire. Anything at all. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor, with panoramic views of the Las Vegas Strip and the desert beyond. It was obscenely luxurious, marble bathrooms, a private elevator, original artwork that Rebecca was certain cost more than most people's houses. Mr. Cardamone arranged everything personally, the bellhop explained as he showed her around. He has exquisite taste. You should see his private collection. Over the following days, Rebecca found herself increasingly dependent on Vincent's services. He seemed to anticipate her every need before she knew she needed it. When she mentioned missing her grandmother's pasta sauce, he somehow procured the exact recipe and had the hotel's chef prepare it perfectly. When she casually admired a painting in the lobby, a similar piece appeared in her suite the next day. How do you do it? She asked him over dinner in the hotel's private dining room. It's like you can read my mind. Vincent's laugh was cultured, sophisticated. I've been in hospitality for a very long time, Mrs. Hartwell. You develop an instinct for what makes people happy. Please call me Rebecca. And how long have you been working here? Since the hotel opened, Vincent replied smoothly. I help design many of the services we offer. The Grand Palazzo isn't just a hotel, it's a sanctuary for those seeking to reinvent themselves. As weeks passed, Rebecca found herself reluctant to leave the hotel. Why would she? Everything she could possibly want was provided by Vincent and his staff. Fine dining, entertainment, shopping, spa services. The Grand Palazzo was a self-contained world of luxury. But gradually, Rebecca began to notice things that troubled her. Other long-term guests moved through the hotel like sleepwalkers, their eyes glazed, their movements mechanical. They all spoke of Vincent with the same worshipful tone, praising his incredible service, his ability to fulfill their every desire. More disturbing were the stories she heard from staff members who thought she wasn't listening. Housekeepers whispering about guests who had been there for years but never seemed to age. Waiters mentioning VIP clients who ordered the same meals every day for decades. Security guards talking about restricted floors that weren't on any building schematics. Rebecca's curiosity was piqued when she discovered that her keycard gave her access to floors that weren't supposed to exist. The elevator buttons only went up to 70, but when she inserted her presidential suite keycard and pressed the button for floor 71, the elevator kept rising. Floor 71 was unlike anything else in the hotel. Instead of guest rooms, it contained what appeared to be a vast private museum. Display cases lined the walls, filled with personal objects, jewelry, photographs, letters, clothing. Each case had a small placard with a name and dates. Margaret Thornton, 1987 to 2019. Elizabeth Wade, 1994 to 2023. Charles Hoffman, 2001 to 2024. Rebecca realized with growing horror that these were memorials to former guests. But why would the hotel keep such morbid souvenirs? Admiring my collection? Vincent's voice came from behind her. Rebecca spun around, her heart pounding. Vincent, you startled me. What is this place? My life's work, he replied, moving gracefully between the display cases. Each piece represents a guest who found what they were truly seeking at the Grand Palazzo. You mean guests who died here? Vincent's expression was pained, as if her words wounded him. Rebecca, please. These people didn't die, they transcended. They found perfect contentment, absolute fulfillment of their desires. Death was simply the final step in their transformation. Rebecca backed toward the elevator, but Vincent moved with fluid speed to block her path. I've been watching you, Rebecca, studying you, learning what makes you happy, what fulfills your deepest needs. You're perfect for my collection. Your collection? Each guest who stays long enough becomes part of the Grand Palazzo's permanent family. Their essence, their life force, becomes woven into the fabric of the hotel itself. They experience eternal bliss, and I gain their vitality, their memories, their unique perspectives on happiness. Vincent's appearance began to change as he spoke. His skin took on a waxy, artificial quality. His eyes reflected light like glass. Most disturbing of all, Rebecca could see other faces flickering beneath his features. Dozens of different people, all the guests he had absorbed over the years. You're not human, Rebecca whispered. I was once a concierge at a small hotel in Venice, 1892. I died trying to save guests from a fire, and when I awakened, I found I had been given a gift, the ability to provide perfect service, to fulfill any desire. But the gift came with a hunger. I needed to consume experiences, emotions, the very essence of happiness itself. The elevator doors behind Rebecca suddenly opened, revealing several of the hotel's long-term guests. But they moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, and their eyes were completely white. My previous acquisitions, Vincent explained proudly. They serve as staff now, helping me provide the perfect experience for new guests. They're completely happy. Their minds contain only pleasant memories, only fulfilled desires. You're stealing their souls, Rebecca said, horrified. I'm perfecting them, Vincent corrected. Remove all the pain, all the disappointment, all the unfulfilled longing. What remains is pure contentment. They get eternal bliss, and I get to continue my work, providing perfect service to those who need it most. Rebecca tried to run, but Vincent's puppets surrounded her with inhuman coordination. Their touch was cold, draining, and she could feel her life force being drawn away. Don't fight it, Rebecca, Vincent crooned. You came here to start over, to find happiness. I can give you that. Forever. As her strength faded, Rebecca's mind raced through everything she knew about Vincent and his supernatural abilities. He was a consummate service professional. His entire existence revolved around fulfilling guests' desires. But what if someone desired something he couldn't provide? Wait, Rebecca gasped, slumping against one of the display cases. Before you take me, I have one last request. Vincent paused, his predatory smile faltering slightly. A request. You pride yourself on perfect service, right? On fulfilling any desire? Of course. Then I want you to let me go. I want to leave this hotel, forget everything I've seen, and return to my normal life. That's my deepest desire, to be free of this place. Vincent's face contorted with confusion and frustration. His nature as a service entity compelled him to fulfill guest requests, but his survival depended on collecting souls. The contradiction created a kind of supernatural feedback loop. That's impossible, he stammered. I can't, my collection. You said you could provide anything, Rebecca pressed, sensing his weakness. You promised perfect service. Was that a lie? The puppets around her began to shake and convulse as Vincent's control wavered. His carefully maintained appearance flickered between human and something far more monstrous. I must serve, but I must feed. Vincent clutched his head as the contradiction tore at his supernatural nature. Rebecca saw her chance. She grabbed a fire axe from the emergency case and brought it down on the nearest display case, shattering the glass and scattering the personal effects within. The moment the case broke, one of Vincent's puppets, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, suddenly gasped and looked around with clear, terrified eyes. "Where am I?" she cried. "What year is it? The last thing I remember was checking into this hotel for a conference." Vincent screamed as part of his accumulated power was torn away. Rebecca realized that the display cases weren't just memorials, they were the supernatural containers holding the trapped souls. "Break the cases, free the souls." She swung the axe at case after case, each shattered display releasing another confused but living person. Vincent grew weaker with each liberation, his stolen vitality flowing back to its rightful owners. "Stop," Vincent pleaded, his voice becoming less human with each passing second. "You don't understand. Without my collection, I'll fade away completely." "Good," Rebecca snarled, destroying another case. "That's exactly what should happen to parasites like you." As the last case shattered, Vincent's form began to dissolve. His carefully maintained human appearance melted away, revealing the truth beneath, not a person at all, but a hunger-given shape, a supernatural entity that existed only to consume the happiness and life force of others. "Please," Vincent whispered as he faded. "I only wanted to serve, to make people happy." "By stealing their lives," Rebecca replied coldly. "That's not service, that's slavery." Vincent dissolved into mist, and with his passing, the hotel began to change. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, colors seemed brighter, and the staff members began moving normally instead of like programmed automatons. The freed souls, nearly 40 people spanning several decades, were understandably confused and traumatized. Rebecca helped organize their evacuation from the hotel, working with local authorities to provide medical care and psychological support. The Grand Palazzo was investigated by both the FBI and several paranormal research organizations. They found evidence of Vincent's supernatural activities dating back to the hotel's opening, but no trace of the entity itself. The official report blamed gas leaks for the mass hallucinations and memory loss experienced by the long-term guests. Rebecca used her considerable financial resources to establish a foundation for supernatural victims, providing support for people who had encountered entities like Vincent. She never stayed in another luxury hotel, preferring modest motels where the service was imperfect but genuine. But she kept Vincent's final display case, the one marked with her own name and dates of birth and intended death. It served as a reminder that perfect service, like anything else that seemed too good to be true, usually came with a hidden price. And sometimes late at night, she could swear she heard Vincent's voice whispering on the wind, "Mrs. Hartwell, how may I serve you today?" The hunger, she realized, never truly died. It just waited for the next opportunity to feed. The Rosewood Manor in the Napa Valley was every bride's dream venue, a Victorian mansion surrounded by vineyards, with gardens that belonged in a fairy tale and a bridal suite that had hosted society weddings for over a century. When Sarah and David Chin booked it for their destination wedding, they thought they were getting the perfect romantic getaway. They had no idea they were walking into someone else's perfect nightmare. "The Rosewood Suite is our crown jewel," gushed coordinator Melissa Thornfield as she led the couple through the mansion's opulent halls. "It's been the bridal suite since 1894, and we've never had an unhappy bride. Not one." The suite was breathtaking, a circular room in the mansion's tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the valley. The centerpiece was an enormous four-poster bed draped in white silk, surrounded by antique furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. "The mirror is original," Melissa pointed to an ornate standing mirror near the windows. "Legend says that every bride who has prepared for her wedding in this room can still be seen in its reflection, all of them radiating perfect happiness." Sarah laughed, examining her engagement ring in the mirror's surface. "That's sweet. David, look, I can almost imagine all those brides before me getting ready for their big day." What Sarah didn't notice was that David's reflection wasn't visible in the antique mirror. Only hers appeared, but she wasn't alone. Dozens of other women in wedding dresses from different eras stood behind her, all smiling with identical expressions of blissful contentment. Their wedding was scheduled for Saturday evening, but Sarah and David arrived Thursday to handle last-minute preparations. The first night passed without incident. They dined on the terrace, walked through the moonlit gardens, and fell asleep in each other's arms in the massive bridal bed. Friday morning, Sarah woke to find a wedding dress laid out on the antique chair beside the mirror. It wasn't her dress. Hers was safely hanging in the closet. This one was older, more elaborate, with intricate beadwork and a train that seemed to go on forever. "David," she called to the bathroom where her fiancé was shaving. "Did you put this dress here?" "What dress?" David emerged, towel around his waist, and looked where Sarah was pointing. "I don't see anything." Sarah stared at him in confusion. The dress was right there, so elaborate and beautiful it was impossible to miss. Very funny. The vintage dress right there in the chair. David's expression grew concerned. Sarah, there's nothing there. Just the empty chair. Sarah looked again. The dress was gone. I must have been dreaming, she said, though she was certain she had been fully awake. The day passed pleasantly enough. They met with the caterer, confirmed arrangements with the photographer, and enjoyed a wine tasting in the vineyard. But as evening approached, Sarah began to feel strange, light-headed, euphoric, as if she were floating several inches above the ground. "You look radiant," Melissa commented when they returned to the suite. "Absolutely glowing. The Rosewood suite has that effect on brides. Something about the room brings out their inner beauty." That night, Sarah had vivid dreams. She was standing in the tower room, but it looked different, older, with gaslight instead of electricity. A woman in an 1890s wedding dress was preparing for her ceremony, humming softly as she arranged her veil. "You're going to be so happy," the woman said without turning around. "We all are. Forever and ever, perfectly happy." "Who are you?" Dream Sarah asked. "I'm Margaret Rosewood, the first bride married in this room. My father built this mansion as a wedding gift, and I was the first to use the bridal suite. I was so happy on my wedding day that I never wanted it to end." Margaret finally turned around, and Sarah saw that her face was frozen in an expression of manic joy, eyes too wide, smile too bright, like a porcelain doll's painted features. "I made a wish in the mirror," Margaret continued, her voice sing-song. "I wish that I could stay happy forever, that every day could be my wedding day. And it came true. Every bride who uses this room becomes part of our eternal celebration." Sarah tried to run, but found herself frozen in place. Other women began appearing in the room, brides from different decades, all wearing their wedding dresses, all with the same terrifying expression of permanent bliss. "We're so excited you're joining us," said a woman in a 1920s flapper-style gown. "It gets lonely sometimes being happy all by ourselves." "But I'm not dead," Sarah protested. "I'm getting married tomorrow." "Oh yes," Margaret agreed. "You'll have a beautiful wedding. And then you'll be happy forever just like us. No sadness, no disappointment, no growing old together. Just eternal bridal bliss." Sarah woke with a gasp, David shaking her gently. "You were having a nightmare," he said, concerned. "You kept saying, 'I don't want to be happy forever.'" Sarah looked around the room. It was 3 a.m. and moonlight streamed through the windows. In the antique mirror, she could see her reflection, and behind her, barely visible in the silvery glass, were the ghostly outlines of women in wedding dresses. "David," she whispered, "I think we need to leave." "What?" "Sarah, we're getting married tomorrow evening. Everything's arranged. Something's wrong with this place. I think the brides who stayed in this room, I think they never left." David looked at her with the patient expression he used when she was being irrational. "Honey, you're just having pre-wedding jitters. It's perfectly normal." But Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. David's reflection was becoming fainter in the mirror, while hers was growing brighter, more defined. It was as if she was becoming part of the mirror's supernatural collection while he was being erased from it entirely. Sarah spent the rest of the night researching the Rosewood Manor on her laptop. What she found confirmed her worst fears. The manor had indeed been built by wine magnate Harrison Rosewood for his daughter Margaret's wedding in 1894. But according to historical records, Margaret had died on her wedding night. The official cause was listed as heart failure due to excessive joy. More disturbing were the records of subsequent brides. Every woman who had spent her wedding night in the Rosewood suite had died within 24 hours of the ceremony. Heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, all attributed to the overwhelming emotion of their wedding day. The pattern had continued for over a century, with dozens of women dying in the height of bridal happiness. But the manor's records told a different story. According to their guest books, all of those brides had extended their stays indefinitely, becoming part of the Rosewood family. There were photos of them at various manor events over the years, always in their wedding dresses, always with the same unsettling expression of perfect joy. The truth was horrifying. The brides weren't dying from happiness. They were being consumed by it, their souls trapped in an eternal moment of wedding bliss while their bodies withered away. The mirror wasn't just showing reflections of past brides, it was their prison, and Sarah was about to become the newest inmate. As dawn broke, Sarah made a desperate decision. She had to get David away from the manor before the wedding ceremony. But when she turned to wake him, she found his side of the bed empty. A note on his pillow read, "Gone to handle some last-minute arrangements." See you at the altar. Love, D. Sarah rushed to the mirror and gasped. David's reflection was completely gone now, but the ghostly brides were clearer than ever. And in the center of them all stood Margaret Rosewood, holding a wedding bouquet made of wilted roses. He can't see us anymore, Margaret explained, her voice echoing strangely. The mirror only shows brides now. Your groom has served his purpose. He brought you to us. Soon you'll join our eternal wedding party. Sarah grabbed her suitcase and began throwing clothes into it. She had to escape before the ceremony, before whatever curse bound this place could claim her. But as she reached for the door handle, it wouldn't turn. The room itself was holding her prisoner. Sarah? David's voice came from the hallway. Why is the door locked? David, help me, she screamed, pounding on the door. I can't get out. The door's not locked, David said, confused. It's wide open. Sarah, what are you doing? From his perspective, Sarah was standing in the middle of the room, hitting the air. But from hers, she was trapped behind an invisible barrier, watching her reflection in the mirror grow more solid while her actual body felt increasingly ethereal. The wedding was scheduled for 6 p.m. As the hours passed, Sarah felt herself being drawn more and more into the mirror's world. The ghostly brides began teaching her their rituals, how to arrange her veil, how to hold her bouquet, how to smile with that perfect expression of eternal joy. Don't fight it, Margaret advised. The happiness is so much better than any pain you've ever felt. No heartbreak, no disappointment, no growing old and watching love fade. Just pure, perfect wedding day bliss forever. Sarah could feel her resistance weakening. The euphoria was intoxicating, like a drug that promised to wash away every worry she'd ever had. Part of her wanted to surrender to it, to join these women in their eternal celebration. But then she remembered something David had said the night before. I can't wait to grow old with you. The imperfection of that statement, the promise of arguments and wrinkles and ordinary Tuesday mornings, suddenly seemed infinitely more precious than artificial eternal bliss. With tremendous effort, Sarah broke away from the mirror and grabbed the antique chair. If she couldn't leave through the door, maybe she could break the window. She hurled the chair at the glass with all her strength. The window shattered, but instead of showing the vineyard outside, it revealed only swirling darkness. The mirror world was trying to consume the entire room. You can't escape, Margaret said sadly. No bride ever has. The happiness always wins in the end. But Sarah had one more idea. She pulled out her phone and called David. David, listen to me carefully. I need you to go to the hotel manager and tell them there's a gas leak in the Rosewood suite. Tell them you can smell it from the hallway. Get them to evacuate the room immediately. Sarah, I'm standing right outside the door. There's no gas leak and you're scaring me. Please just trust me. Do it now. 20 minutes later, Sarah heard commotion in the hallway. The hotel's maintenance staff had arrived with gas detectors, and to everyone's surprise, they were indeed picking up unusual readings. The manager, liability conscious, ordered the room evacuated immediately. The moment Sarah stepped across the threshold, the spell broke. She could move freely again and David could see her properly. Behind them, the Rosewood Suite's door slammed shut of its own accord. We're leaving, Sarah announced. Now. But the wedding. We'll get married at City Hall on Monday. I don't care about the deposits or the guests or any of it. We're not spending another night in this place. As they drove away from the Rosewood Manor, Sarah looked back to see a figure in the tower window, Margaret Rosewood, still in her wedding dress, watching them leave with that terrible expression of eternal joy. They did get married at City Hall, with Sarah's parents and David's sister as witnesses. It was nothing like the fairy tale wedding Sarah had always dreamed of. No elegant gown, no romantic setting, no professional photographer. Just a simple ceremony in a sterile government building. It was perfect. But sometimes, when Sarah looks in mirrors, she can still see them. The ghostly brides of Rosewood Manor, forever celebrating their wedding day, forever trapped in someone else's idea of happiness. And she's grateful every day for the imperfect, beautiful reality of a love that's allowed to grow and change and age. The Rosewood Manor still operates today. They've had to close the tower suite temporarily due to structural issues, but they expect it to reopen soon. After all, they've never had an unhappy bride. Not one. The Grandview Hotel in downtown Seattle was the kind of establishment that prided itself on service. 5 stars, impeccable reviews, and a concierge desk that could arrange anything from dinner reservations to impossible theater tickets. When tech executive Jennifer Walsh checked in for a week-long business conference, she expected luxury and efficiency. She got something else entirely. "Welcome to the Grandview, Ms. Walsh," said the concierge, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and an accent that seemed to shift between British and something else entirely. His name tag read Edmund Blackthorne, head concierge since 1987. "I'm here to ensure your stay is absolutely perfect. Whatever you need, whatever you desire, I can arrange it." Jennifer was impressed by the personal touch. "That's very kind, but I'm here for business. Just need reliable Wi-Fi and room service." Edmund's smile was warm, but his eyes remained cold. "Oh, but surely there's something else? Something you've always wanted but never asked for? I have a gift for knowing what people truly need." Jennifer laughed politely and headed to her room on the 23rd floor. It was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, and a marble bathroom that belonged in a spa. She unpacked, ordered room service, and settled in for the evening. The first strange thing happened at 3 a.m. Jennifer woke to the sound of her phone ringing. The hotel's number appeared on the caller ID. "Ms. Walsh?" Edmund's voice was smooth and professional. "I do apologize for the late call, but I've been thinking about our conversation earlier. I sense you're struggling with loneliness. Perhaps I could arrange some companionship?" Jennifer sat up in bed, confused and annoyed. "I'm sorry, what? I never said anything about being lonely. And it's 3 in the morning. Forgive me, I must have misunderstood. Sleep well, Ms. Walsh." The line went dead. Jennifer stared at her phone, wondering if she'd dreamed the whole thing. She'd been divorced for 2 years, and yes, she was lonely sometimes, but she'd never mentioned that to anyone at the hotel. How could he possibly know? The next morning, Jennifer tried to put the strange call out of her mind. She attended her conference sessions, networked with colleagues, and returned to the hotel around 6 p.m. At the elevator, she encountered Edmund again. "Ah, Ms. Walsh. How was your day? You look tired. The conference is draining, I imagine." "It's fine," Jennifer replied curtly, still unsettled by the previous night's call. "I've taken the liberty of arranging something special for you," Edmund continued, pressing the elevator button. "A massage therapist will be visiting your room at 8 p.m. Complimentary, of course. You seem to carry a great deal of tension in your shoulders." Jennifer was about to protest that she hadn't requested any massage, but then she realized her shoulders were indeed aching from hunching over her laptop all day. How had he noticed that? "I don't think." "Nonsense. You deserve to be taken care of. After all, who else is going to do it?" The elevator doors opened, and Edmund gestured for her to enter. As the doors closed, Jennifer caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished metal. For just a moment, his face looked different, younger, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. At 8 p.m. sharp, there was a knock at Jennifer's door. She opened it to find a woman in her 30s with a professional massage table. "I'm Lisa from the hotel spa. Mr. Blackthorne said you'd requested a therapeutic massage?" Jennifer was about to correct her, but the woman looked so kind and professional, and Jennifer's shoulders were killing her. Yes, I suppose I did. The massage was incredible." Lisa had magic hands that seemed to know exactly where Jennifer held her stress. As she worked, she made casual conversation. "You know, Mr. Blackthorne has been here forever. He really cares about the guests. Sometimes I think he knows what people need better than they do themselves." "How long has he worked here?" Jennifer asked, face down on the table. "Oh, decades. My mother used to work here in the 80s, and she said he was already head concierge then. Never seems to age, that one. Must have good genes." When the massage was over, Jennifer felt more relaxed than she had in months. She tipped Lisa generously and settled in for the night, grateful despite her earlier reservations. The second strange call came at 3 a.m. again. "Ms. Walsh, I hope you enjoyed your massage. I couldn't help but notice you've been having trouble sleeping. The stress of your work, perhaps? I could arrange for some assistance with that as well." Jennifer was wide awake now, disturbed by the pattern. "How do you know I'm having trouble sleeping?" "It's my job to notice these things. The bags under your eyes, the way you hesitate before pressing the elevator button for your floor. You're dreading going back to an empty room, aren't you?" Jennifer's blood ran cold. She hadn't realized she was doing that, but he was right. She had been hesitating at the elevator, putting off the moment when she'd have to return to the solitude of her hotel room. "I could arrange for you to have some company," Edmund continued. "Nothing inappropriate, of course. Simply someone to talk to. Someone who understands loneliness." "I'm not lonely," Jennifer lied. "Of course not. My mistake. Sleep well, Ms. Walsh." But sleep didn't come easily. Jennifer found herself thinking about Edmund's words, about how long it had been since she'd had a real conversation with someone, How empty her apartment felt when she returned from business trips. She'd thrown herself into work after her divorce, telling herself she preferred the independence. But lying in the dark of the hotel room, she couldn't deny the ache of isolation. The third day followed the same pattern. Jennifer attended her conference sessions, but found herself distracted, thinking about the mysterious concierge. When she returned to the hotel, Edmund was waiting in the lobby as if he'd been expecting her. "Ms. Walsh, you look troubled. The presentation didn't go well?" Jennifer was startled. Her afternoon presentation had indeed been a disaster. Technical difficulties, hostile questions from the audience, and her own nervous stumbling over words. But how could he possibly know that? "I've arranged for dinner to be sent to your room," Edmund continued. "Something comforting. And perhaps afterward we could have a chat. I'm an excellent listener." Jennifer wanted to refuse, but the offer was tempting. She was tired of eating alone, tired of pretending she was perfectly fine with her solitary existence. "Just dinner," she said finally. "Of course. I'll stop by around 9 p.m. if that's acceptable." At 9 p.m., Edmund arrived at Jennifer's door with a bottle of wine and that same warm smile. He was dressed more casually now, in a dark sweater that made his silver hair look distinguished. "May I come in?" Jennifer hesitated, then stepped aside. Edmund moved into the room with an easy familiarity, as if he'd been there many times before. "You know," he said, settling into the chair by the window, "I've been in this business for a very long time. I've seen thousands of guests come and go, and I've developed something of a sixth sense about what people need." "And what do you think I need?" Jennifer asked, accepting a glass of wine. "Connection. You've built walls around yourself since your divorce. Understandable, really. Trust is a fragile thing, easily broken. But isolation isn't healing, it's just slow death." Jennifer's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her wine glass. "You seem to know a lot about my personal life." "I know about loneliness," Edmund replied. "I've been alone for a very long time." As the evening progressed, Jennifer found herself opening up to Edmund in ways she hadn't with anyone in years. He was an excellent listener, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that seemed almost prescient. The wine helped, but there was something else, a magnetic quality about him that made her want to share her deepest secrets. "I used to think I was better off alone," she admitted. "After my ex-husband. Well, after what he did, I thought I could protect myself by not needing anyone. But the protection became a prison," Edmund observed. "It always does." "Yes," Jennifer whispered, surprised by how clearly he understood. "I could help you with that," Edmund said quietly. "I could arrange for you to never feel lonely again." Something in his tone made Jennifer look up sharply. Edmund's appearance seemed to have changed subtly. His hair was darker, his features sharper, and his eyes held an intensity that made her skin crawl. "What do you mean?" "I mean I could make you part of the hotel's permanent family. You'd never have to leave, never have to face the world alone again. There are others here, long-term residents who found what they were looking for." Jennifer set down her wine glass with a shaking hand. "I think you should leave." Edmund's smile didn't waver. "I understand your hesitation. It's a big decision. But think about it. No more empty apartments, no more business trips to cities where you know no one, no more pretending you're fine when you're slowly dying inside. Get out," Jennifer said, standing up. "Now." Edmund rose gracefully, his demeanor unchanged. "Of course, I'll give you time to consider. But remember, Ms. Walsh, I'm here whenever you need me, day or night." After he left, Jennifer double-locked the door and called the front desk. "I'd like to speak to the manager about your concierge, Edmund Blackthorne." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have a concierge by that name. Our head concierge is Maria Santos, and she's been with us for 3 years. Jennifer's blood turned to ice. "The man with silver hair in his 50s, British accent? Name tag says he's been here since 1987? "I'm sorry, but there's no one on our staff matching that description. Are you feeling all right? Should I send someone up to check on you?" Jennifer hung up and immediately began packing. She had to get out of the hotel, away from whatever Edmund was. But as she folded her clothes, she found a note tucked between her sweaters, elegant handwriting on hotel stationery. "My dear Jennifer, I know you're frightened, but there's no need to run. I've been helping lonely souls for decades, giving them exactly what they need. The hotel has many long-term residents who were once as lost as you are. They're happy now, never alone, never wanting for anything. Room 1247 has been prepared for you whenever you're ready to accept what you truly desire. E.B." Jennifer grabbed her suitcase and ran for the elevator. But when the doors opened, Edmund was inside, smiling that patient smile. Going somewhere? Your conference isn't over until tomorrow. Let me out, Jennifer said, backing away from the elevator. I can't do that. You've seen too much now, and besides, you belong here. You've always belonged here. All those years of loneliness, of failed relationships, of career success that never filled the void, it was all leading to this moment. Jennifer turned and ran for the stairwell, but the door was locked. Every door on the floor was locked. She was trapped on the 23rd floor with a creature that wore the face of a helpful concierge. Please, she whispered, pressing her back against the wall. I'm not going to hurt you, Edmund said gently. I'm going to save you. From loneliness, from rejection, from the pain of human connection that always ends in disappointment. The residents of 1247 want for nothing. They have each other, and they have me to take care of them. What are you? I'm what I've always been. Someone who provides what people need. You came to me broken, isolated, afraid to trust again. I can fix all of that. Jennifer's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Room 1247. We're waiting for you. You'll love it here. Your new family. Edmund held out his hand. Come with me, Jennifer. Let me give you what you've always wanted, a place where you belong, where you'll never be alone again. Jennifer looked at his hand, then at the locked doors surrounding her. She thought about her empty apartment, her non-existent social life, the years stretching ahead of her filled with nothing but work and solitude. For a moment, she almost took his hand. Then she remembered something her therapist had said years ago. Loneliness is temporary, but some solutions are permanent. Instead of taking Edmund's hand, Jennifer smashed the fire alarm with her fist. The piercing sound filled the hallway, and suddenly she could hear voices, real voices, from other floors, other guests awakened by the alarm. Edmund's face contorted with rage. You don't understand what you're giving up. I understand perfectly, Jennifer said as the sound of footsteps thundered in the stairwell. I'm giving up a prison disguised as paradise. The fire department arrived within minutes, evacuating the building. In the chaos, Edmund disappeared, and Jennifer found herself standing on the sidewalk outside the Grandview Hotel, shivering in the Seattle rain. The next morning, she checked into a different hotel and called her sister. The first time they'd spoken in months. Jen, is everything okay? It's so early. I just wanted to hear your voice, Jennifer said, tears streaming down her face. I've been so stupid pushing everyone away. You're not stupid. You're just scared. We all are sometimes. Jennifer looked back at the Grandview Hotel, towering above the Seattle skyline. In one of the upper windows, she could see a figure watching her, Edmund, still wearing his concierge uniform, still smiling that patient smile. She turned her back on him and walked away. The Grandview Hotel still operates today, and they still pride themselves on exceptional service. Guests frequently comment on how the staff seems to know exactly what they need, sometimes before they know it themselves. The hotel's long-term residence program is particularly popular with business travelers who find themselves extended indefinitely. After all, who wouldn't want to stay somewhere that makes them feel like they never have to be alone again? The Meridian Hotel was a gleaming 30-story tower in the heart of Chicago, the kind of place where pharmaceutical executives held conferences and pharmaceutical sales reps closed deals worth millions. Dr. Amanda Foster had been attending the International Pain Management Symposium there for 3 days, and she was exhausted from presentations, networking events, and the constant pressure to smile professionally while discussing the opioid crisis her industry had helped create. She just wanted to get to her room on the 27th floor, order room service, and forget about the judgmental looks she'd been getting all week from former colleagues who'd left pharmaceutical work for more ethical positions. The elevator in the Meridian's East Wing was notorious for being slow, but Amanda was too tired to walk to the main bank of elevators. She pressed the call button and waited, checking her phone for messages from her teenage daughter back in Phoenix. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Amanda stepped inside without looking up from her phone. It wasn't until the doors closed that she realized she wasn't alone. A man in a dark suit stood in the corner, his face partially obscured by shadows despite the elevator's bright fluorescent lighting. He was holding a leather briefcase and wore the kind of expensive watch that screamed pharmaceutical executive. 27, please, Amanda said, assuming he was already heading up. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there perfectly still like a statue. Amanda looked more closely and realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The man's skin had an odd, waxy quality, and she couldn't see him breathing. His eyes were open but completely unfocused, staring at nothing. Excuse me, are you all right? she asked, reaching toward the control panel to press the emergency button. The moment her finger touched the button, the man's head snapped toward her with an audible crack. His eyes locked onto hers, and Amanda saw that they were completely black. No iris, no pupil, just endless darkness. 27, he said in a voice that sounded like it was coming from underwater. Dr. Foster. Amanda Catherine Foster. Age 43. Specializes in pain management pharmaceuticals. Divorced. One daughter, Emma, age 16. Amanda's blood turned to ice. How do you know my name? The man smiled, revealing teeth that were too white and too sharp. I know everyone who rides this elevator. I know their names, their sins, their secrets. I know what they've done and what they deserve. Amanda frantically pressed the button for the next floor, but nothing happened. The elevator continued its slow ascent, the floor numbers climbing. 15, 16, 17. You developed OxyContin 2.0, didn't you? The man continued conversationally. The one that was supposed to be less addictive. How many people are dead because of your research, Dr. Foster? I don't know what you're talking about, Amanda lied, but her voice shook. She had worked on the reformulation project, had signed off on trials that she knew were inadequate, had kept quiet when the marketing department made claims that weren't supported by the data. 17,432, the man said precisely. That's how many people died from your particular formulation last year alone. But who's counting? The elevator continued to climb. 18, 19, 20. You are, apparently, Amanda whispered. What are you? I'm an accountant, the man replied, and somehow that was more terrifying than any supernatural explanation. I keep track of debts. And you, Dr. Foster, have quite a substantial balance due. Amanda pounded on the elevator doors. Let me out. Let me out right now. But we haven't reached your floor yet. 27, wasn't it? Almost there. 21, 22, 23. I was just doing my job, Amanda said desperately. I didn't make the marketing decisions. I didn't set the prices. I just did the research. Just following orders? The man's smile widened. How original. Tell me, Dr. Foster, do you remember Marcus Williams? Amanda's face went pale. Marcus Williams was a name she tried to forget for 2 years. I see you do remember, the man continued. 12 years old. Chronic pain from a car accident. Your drug turned him into an addict by age 14. He died of an overdose on his 16th birthday in a gas station bathroom in Toledo, Ohio. His mother found him. Stop, Amanda whispered. Then there's Sarah Chen, age 23. New mother, back surgery, prescribed your miracle pain reliever. Lost custody of her infant son when she couldn't stop taking the pills. Committed suicide 3 months later. 24, 25, 26. I said stop. Michael Rodriguez, age 67. Vietnam veteran, hip replacement surgery. Your drug was supposed to help him walk again. Instead, it killed him. Heart attack brought on by withdrawal symptoms when his doctor cut him off. Amanda sank to her knees in the corner of the elevator, tears streaming down her face. I know about all of them. Do you think I don't know? Do you think I sleep at night? Actually, you sleep quite well, the man replied, checking his watch. Ambien, 2 milligrams, every night for the past 3 years. Another pharmaceutical solution to a pharmaceutical problem. How poetic. The elevator finally reached the 27th floor, but the doors didn't open. This is my floor, Amanda said. I want to get off. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, this elevator doesn't stop at 27 for people like you. It has a special destination. Amanda looked at the floor indicator. Instead of 27, it now showed a symbol she didn't recognize. Something that looked like a balance scale, but upside down. Where are we going? To settle your account, the man said, opening his briefcase. Inside were thousands of photographs, victims of pharmaceutical addiction, each one carefully labeled with a name, age, and cause of death. These are your invoices, Dr. Foster. Payment is due. The elevator began to shake, the lights flickering. Amanda could hear sounds from outside, screaming, crying, the sound of machinery. The air grew thick and hot, smelling of sulfur and antiseptic. I want to make amends, Amanda said desperately. I'll testify against the company. I'll expose everything I know. I'll donate my money to addiction treatment centers. The man looked genuinely surprised. You want to make amends? How refreshing. Most of your colleagues just make excuses. My colleagues? Oh yes, you're not the first pharmaceutical executive to ride this elevator. Dr. Peterson from the 15th floor, He was the lead researcher on the original formulation. Very unrepentant. And Mr. Hoffman from the 22nd floor, head of marketing, he actually tried to bribe me. The man closed his briefcase and straightened his tie. But you're offering to make amends. That's interesting. Tell me, what exactly are you willing to sacrifice to balance the scales? Amanda thought of her daughter Emma, of the college fund she'd built with blood money, of the comfortable life she'd provided through her complicity in mass poisoning. Everything, she said. I'll give up everything. The man studied her for a long moment. Everything? Yes. Your house in Phoenix? Your daughter's college fund? Your pension? Your medical license? Your freedom? Amanda nodded, tears still streaming. All of it. If it means those families get justice, if it means preventing more deaths. Yes, everything. The man was quiet for a long time, the only sound the mechanical humming of the elevator as it continued its descent past floors that shouldn't exist. Finally he spoke. Dr. Foster, in all my years of collecting debts, very few people have offered genuine sacrifice. Most beg for mercy they never showed others. But you. He paused, studying her face. You actually feel remorse. The elevator suddenly lurched, and Amanda felt it changing direction, rising instead of falling. What's happening? Your account has been restructured, the man said, his voice softer now. You will live, Dr. Foster. But your life as you knew it is over. Tomorrow you will wake up in your hotel room and you will do exactly what you promised. You will expose everything. You will testify. You will give away every penny you earned from their suffering. The elevator dinged softly, and the doors opened to reveal the 27th floor hallway, normal, mundane, real. And if I don't? Amanda asked, though she already knew she would keep her word. Store. The man smiled, but this time it held no malice. Then we'll meet again. And next time the elevator won't stop. Amanda stepped out into the hallway on shaking legs. When she turned back, the elevator was empty. She never saw the man again, but she kept her promise. 6 months later, Dr. Amanda Foster's testimony brought down Meridian Pharmaceuticals and resulted in the largest settlement in medical history. She lost everything she owned, just as she'd promised, but she gained something more valuable: the ability to sleep without pharmaceutical assistance. And sometimes, late at night, when she lay in her small apartment working at the addiction treatment center where she now volunteered, she could swear she heard the soft ding of an elevator, followed by a voice saying, "Account settled. Balance paid in full." The Meridian Hotel was demolished 2 years later. But some say the elevator still runs, carrying its special passengers to their final accounting. And if you know where to look, if you've done the kind of things that require settling accounts, you might just find yourself pressing that call button, waiting for a ride to a floor that doesn't appear on any directory. After all, everyone has debts to pay. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to settle them yourself, or wait for the accountant to come collect.